Hello, hello, and welcome to Expat Chronicles. This is Kim and Lizzie, and we are here for a very special, once again, I know I always say that. I always say that our recordings are special, but this one's very special because we have someone here who is going to give us such great information, but I'm going to leave that to Lizzie to explain. But before we begin, once again, welcome to Expat Chronicles. Okay, guys. All right. So welcome back. As I was saying before, we have a very special guest with us. And also, I just want to throw this out here. We also have a small little audience, the first time ever for Expat Chronicles. So we're super excited. Say hi, yay. Hi. Okay, so we're here live and ready to do this recording for you guys to hear this information that we have to share. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Lizzie, because Lizzie, hey, how you doing?
I'm good, Kim. How you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you. All right.
Okay, so we've got a special one. Special and amazing. We got her to agree to scheduling. Her booking is tight. Yes, and great because she's also family. And it's such a pleasure to be able to sing her praises, especially for amazing women who do mighty things and never get recognition.
Yes, right. Agreed.
So today we have Thenji Moyo.
Welcome, Thenji. Yeah. Throw it out there.
Thenji is the legal director and head of employment at Gately, and she comes with a lot of accolades. So I'm just going to name three, just three. She was named Employment Lawyer of the Year for 2022, Diversity Initiative of the Year 2022, Equality Initiative of the Year 2022.
Wow.
And right now she is gearing and getting ready to participate in the trade mission to Saudi for women in business on the 1st and 2nd of March. Right, so shout out to Thenji and thank you for coming.
Thank you guys for having me. I'm so excited and delighted to be here.
Welcome, Thenji. I'm so happy as well. All right, this is great. And first, before we know that Lizzie just gave us slight background information of who you are and what you do, but can you give us a little bit more of just your years here? Because we're in the UAE, and how long you've been in here, and just a little bit more about you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have been here for almost 13 years. So I consider the UAE home away from home.
And where is home? Just to clarify.
So I'm from Zimbabwe, born in the UK.
Awesome, yes.
So having lived in Zimbabwe, the UK, South Africa, I feel Dubai is a great fit for me because I'm so used to all the different cultures. But yes, I've been here for 13 years and counting. Absolutely love it here and enjoy doing what I do. So thank you for the warm introduction. I am an employment lawyer. That is my main area of specialism, dealing with employment law, immigration law, and really on a day-to-day basis, mainly dealing with expats. So Expat Chronicles is exactly the place where I need to be today. Thank you.
Yes, and we're happy to have you here. Yes, and so just like you said, you deal with the employment factor, and that's really what we want to dive into here.
Yeah.
It's just, ask you those questions that a lot of people don't know about as expats. It's so lovely to have that contract be given to us to be abroad, to do these things, but at the same time, a lot of people don't actually know what goes into working so far away from home. And so we would love to really dive into that and started off with just really understanding how, when it comes to that contract, what are some of the red flags that you would say that people experience when it comes to getting that initial contract and contemplating that moving abroad?
Yeah, I think it's very important to, before you move to the UAE, kind of understand the law and what some of the standard terms and conditions that you find in most contracts. Mm-hmm. So of course we know everyone, they get a job, they want to get paid. So you want your basic salary.
Right.
But what we find in the Middle East are some allowances that tend to be standard practice. So, housing allowance, transportation allowance, flight allowance.
Right.
But it's important for people to know that these are not mandatory benefits.
Wow.
It's more market practice.
I did not
So
know
people,
that.
yeah,
Wow.
people assume they're entitled to a ticket home every year. It's not in the labor law. It's market practice, okay? And people assume they're entitled to housing allowance or transportation allowance.
Mm-hmm.
It's just customary. So we have many people who are just on a basic salary only. And that's okay too, right?
Right.
So, but when we talk about what's mandatory, yes, you must have your ticket back home. If you're coming to the end of your contract, for example, you come to termination.
Mm-hmm.
It's very important to understand, for example, end of service gratuity, which gets paid at the end of your employment, is only calculated on your basic salary.
Right.
So always look for
I
that.
didn't know that. Yeah.
So if you're talking about red flags, look at the ratio between your basic salary and allowances. We always recommend not less than 50% of the overall compensation should be your basic salary. What we tend to see as a market trend is usually about 60, 40.
Yeah.
It's not there in the law to say it must be 60, 40. But again, the basic salary must not be so low that it can be deemed shambolic. Okay? So we have had cases where someone's on 1,000 dirhams basic salary, and then every month they get 60,000. Of course, when they go to court, the court's going to say that's a sham. So very important to make sure that your basic salary is proportionate to the allowances. So that's a massive red flag.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's huge. Wow.
I'm curious though, if all these other benefits are not mandatory and you don't get them, and your salary or your whatever your payment that is made to you every month is not enough to survive, then what happens?
I think we need to understand that it's very important for employers to be competitive, right? Mm-hmm. So you want people to work for you.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you're going to offer a very low basic, then you need to give housing. So especially blue collar workers, for example,
Yes,
they require accommodation, right?
Yeah.
Because their salary is so low.
Right.
But what companies are now doing is they need to realize, or they need to make their compensation, their packages, so attractive to attract people. Otherwise, you're not going to go there, right?
Yeah.
So look at, when you're looking at the compensation, look and see, that all the essentials are covered. What is the annual leave requirement? So the statutory minimum, which is the minimum, is 30 calendar days per year.
Yeah.
But some companies, for example, want to be more competitive. So they'll give you maybe 30 working days, 35 working days.
Right.
Or some will say, after 5 years, we'll give you 40. So it's very interesting what companies are doing to attract the best talent. So the UAE wants to be, one of the leading working economic hubs in the world.
Right.
You can only do that if you have good compensation packages.
Yeah.
And the big one, medical care, is that mandatory?
Yes, so medical care is mandatory. Everyone who has a visa, your sponsor should provide your medical insurance, okay? So everyone should have it.
Right.
Again, make sure, especially if you have anyone who's in HR who's listening to this podcast, make sure that you don't cancel the insurance on the termination date. Make sure that the employee is still covered during the grace period. So when you change jobs, right?
Yeah.
You've got maybe that 30-day grace period, and it's still important if anything happens.
Right.
So we have had cases where something's happened to an employee during the grace period. They haven't got the insurance, and the liability still comes on the former sponsor. Okay, so the medical insurance should, in our view, continue until either the person exits the UAE, changes sponsorship, or the end of the grace period.
Okay, that's good to know. That's
good
that you have that 30-day grace period.
Yeah.
Because we are aware of that, but we don't know what goes into that 30-day grace period. So that's good to know. So talking about sick leave, because this is something that actually came up recently in terms of probation. Because of course you're coming over here, you have a new contract, you're excited, but like all jobs, not just in the UAE, you're put on probation until. So this question came up in terms of sick leave during probation.
Yeah.
Is that possible? Are you liable to have these couple of days if you get sick? I mean, because no one knows what's going to happen. But, I'm hearing these rumblings that if you get sick during probation, that's not allowed. You might get terminated. What is the legality on that?
Really, really good question. So, you are not entitled to paid sick leave during probation.
Yes.
Right?
It's paid sick leave.
Gotcha.
Gotcha.
Okay. So if you're signed off sick,
yes,
you're off sick, but it might be unpaid.
Okay.
Right. So just
Okay.
make sure that you have your medical certificate. If you're unable to work, you're unable to work during it. But it's more about the payment.
Right.
Okay. After the probationary period, if you are sick, if you have a sick note, then you will be entitled to paid sick leave.
Okay, yes.
Okay, so if we talk about what the entitlements are per year, you have the first 15 days, which is full pay. And then if for any reason it needs to continue, then it's the next 30 days at half pay. So that's 45 days. And the next 45 days unpaid. 90 days, and then that's it.
Okay, so that answers a
And
lot
that's
of questions
onshore.
for us.
That's
Yeah,
onshore, yeah.
because that was something that we were going back and forth with some coworkers in terms of, making sure that they were worried. They're on probation, and they're like, I don't want to take a sick day, because I'm worried they might terminate me because of just one day. And I'm like,
Right.
termination after one day of sick.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't help that you're getting sick. I mean, we
Yeah.
just came out of a whole pandemic.
Yeah.
So something like that is just something you really need to know the foundation on, because a lot of people don't know. Like, as much as we might read our contracts, and some might not, through and through, we still miss out on those little things that are very important, and our employers don't really want us to know.
Yeah, and very important after the probationary period, if you are sick, most staff handbooks or most companies will say after the third day you need to produce a sick note.
Right.
So most employers are quite happy for the first, 2 to 3 days for you to self-certify.
Exactly.
They're not coming in.
Yeah.
But then afterwards, if it's a longer period, then you need
But I feel like the UAE is just now catching up with that. I don't know if that's been something that's been happening for a years back, but I know, especially in my job and Lizzie and I's job, we just this year got that
self-certified
allowance, for that. Every years before, it was you must have a doctor's leave. You must eat 1 day, 2 day. It didn't matter. You had to have. So I don't know if that's just the UAE catching up with the times. Would you say that, or it was just at this point, this company at the time?
No, so the labor law changed in February of last year.
Okay.
So, and what it actually changed was the self-certification from 2 days to 3 days.
Okay.
So the self-certification was actually always
there,
but I can imagine, depending on industry, some rules depending on what you do. I suppose you guys are teachers. It's a little bit more stringent than others.
I have another question on sick leave. So the day of the week, does that affect your sick leave? Because we hear of if you're sick on a Monday, then you need a medical certificate covering the weekend as well. Or if you're sick on a Friday, you need medical leave covering the weekend as well. Otherwise, I guess it comes from people playing the mick, where they're absent. But legally, when you look at it from a legal standpoint,
so there's no longer an official day of the week anyway. So previously under the old law, Friday was the official rest day.
Right.
So now your rest day can be Wednesday. So I haven't come across a rule that says if you're off sick Monday, you would, because I would count that as day one. Of non-attendance on being a count of sick leave if you are working Monday to Friday, and many people in the UAE are not. As you know, we go to the malls, people are working, so it just depends.
Right. Another one, just on the employment contracts. So when you on board, you're given a contract before you leave your country. That's if you're hired externally. And then when you do arrive, you're usually given another contract that you need to sign that is given to the Ministry of, I think it's Labor. My question is, so if there's a discrepancy between the two contracts.
Yeah.
Either, because some people get that contract officially when they arrive, some people have to sign that one officially when their probation period is over. But if there's a discrepancy between the two contracts, the one you initially were given and the one that you're asked to sign, then what happens?
I think that's a good question, and I think that happened a lot. People were offered a lot of money to come to the UAE. They sell their house, they resign from their jobs, they come to the UAE, and then when they sign their contract, it's completely different terms to what they were offered when they were outside. So what the Ministry of Labour or Ministry of Human Resources and Emiratisation made some changes a couple of years ago, which essentially means if somebody receives an offer letter when they're outside, when they come in, so if you come in on an entry permit, the employer is bound to those terms and conditions, but can only improve on that.
That's good to know.
Yeah. But you find a lot of people, they come in, they don't have a job, they get a job when they get here.
Yeah.
So then basically it would be whatever you agree on the contract that's filed with the ministry or the relevant free zones, depending on where you're working.
Okay. So when people are coming in to work, let's say they're coming in and of course they don't have a job, they're desperate at this point, it's work when they can, working, let's say specifically on weekends. What is legally, how many weekends a month is one allowed to work, depending on, I guess, does it depend on the type of job they have or like their leave time? Because we know that Friday, like you said, Friday we know is one of those common days where most people have off work because that is considered a religious holiday here in the UAE. But how does that work when it comes to that weekend work?
Yeah, so now it's you're just entitled to a rest day. Whatever the rest day is.
Okay.
Before, historically, you're right, it used to be Friday.
Right.
But that's gone now because I think if you look and see what Dubai's like, so many people were working on Friday.
Yes, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So now people are entitled to a rest day. I mean, we know someone in events, their rest day is Wednesday, right? So they would be entitled to some sort of uplift if they work that, whatever the rest day is for them. So your rest day, depending on where you work, is different.
It's different, yeah.
So the maximum working hours is 48 hours per week, which is on a 6-day week. So in some industries, like those in construction, it's normal to work a 6-day week.
Okay.
And then they would have that 1-day rest day.
Just 1 day.
1-day rest day is fine. That's exactly how it works under the law here. But industry practice, they have the weekend.
Yeah.
But it's not mandatory.
And then overtime, is that a common phrase we can use in the Middle East? What is defined as overtime?
Very good question. So overtime, we spoke about the maximum working hours. Now, there are some categories of employees that are entitled to overtime payment, but there is an exemption if you're considered a supervisor or someone in a supervisory role. So there's some roles, probably like teachers, you'd be considered supervisor, you're in a kind of, supervisory position, and therefore you're exempt. But if you have junior employees who don't have any supervisory responsibilities, if they are asked by their manager to work additional time, then they're entitled to overtime payment, but it must be only a maximum of 2 hours. So you can't say to someone you're working, 16-hour day, even though we've heard of such violations. But it's in certain circumstances. There are many exemptions. So directors, those at sea, those who work, in factories. There's many exemptions. So not everyone's entitled to overtime.
Okay. And just to kind of give context, like Dubai, the UAE, a lot of people, they understand, they know of Abu Dhabi, they know of Dubai, but they don't really understand that Dubai is a bustling city. Abu Dhabi is a bustling city. There are people in and out constantly working, doing a lot of things to help the city grow. You said you've been here for 13 plus years, and I've been here 7 years. Lizzie, 8 years is it now? And we have seen massive growth. Can we say, honestly, massive growth in the UAE, which could not have been done without those working here, without those putting, leaving their families, leaving their homes, coming here to really help this country grow. So it's really, really important. It's great that we're having this conversation with Thenji to really understand these labor laws, because people come in and a lot of people abuse what this labor, this growth that's happening, because they see that Dubai, the UAE, I don't want to just say Dubai, but the UAE in general is growing massively, and right now is the time to really get in and be part of that growth. But at the same time, you don't want to get caught up in a situation where you're being cheated out of your money. You're being, lied to. Because it can easily happen here. As much as we like to say, hey, people are fair, people are this, it doesn't matter where you go in the world. There's always going to be someone who's going to say, hey, I'm going to take this from you. I'm not going to give this to you. So it's really good that we're having this conversation to really understand that these are our rights within the UAE. And we are allowed to this. And we have heard, and I want to put this out in positivity facts, we've heard so many success stories from people who have come here and got their contract, made their money, left happily, or even if they got into a dispute, went to the lawyers, to the courts, and won their disputes, won those things. So it's not something that's just written and not followed. It's something that is written and they understand it and they follow it. And so this is something that I just want to highlight within this conversation, because it's very important that we notice this. So just moving on, all right, so, along with our, Liz, you want to join this here? Because I know I just went on in there.
I'm big on the new labor law. So with the new labor law, there's been a lot of positive changes. But I think the sticking point for most people is the change from unlimited contracts to limited contracts, right? What's the deadline for this, for your employer to do this? And then the biggest one is there any safety net? Can terms and conditions of your employment be changed as this transition happens? And if that happens, are you allowed to walk away if you're not happy with the terms and conditions? Are you allowed to renegotiate the terms and conditions if you feel like the initial terms and conditions were not exactly to your satisfaction?
Okay, so let's just start off with the difference between the unlimited contract and the limited contract. So the unlimited contract is a contract which has a clear start date, but it runs open-ended until either party gives notice. A limited contract is one that has a clear start date and end date. So under the new law, when it first came out, they said that the term for the limited contract should be limited at 3 years. I think there was a lot of pushback, so that cap was removed.
So just not to interrupt you really quickly, but just when you say 3 years, because normally that's the amount of time for our visa. So, but coming in, I got an unlimited contract, right? With a 3-year visa. So how is that?
So it's very important to make a distinction between the visa and the contract.
Okay.
So visa is to do with your residency. Your employment contract is to do with your employment.
Okay.
But a lot of people tend to lump the two together because there is that administrative step that is taken, right? So if we separate your residency from your employment, we'll now see that you'll have a fixed term contract. So now that the cap has been removed, some companies are giving their employees fixed term contracts for 10 years. That doesn't mean your visa will be 10 years.
Because they can't give us a 10-year visa.
Unless you go onto the golden visa. But your visa might still be 2 to 3 years. But your employment will be 10 years renewable. Now, what a lot of companies have also said is look, we want to give our employees the reassurance that nothing's changing. So when you draft our limited contracts, put in an automatic renewal clause, right? Which basically means when it comes to the end, we're just going to automatically renew it on the same terms and conditions. Okay. So some contracts are automatically renewing.
Okay.
You can also have the renewal where the parties discuss and decide, are we going to renew on the same terms and conditions? Are we going to change it? What are we going to do? So depending on on the approach that your employer wants, some employers will say, look, we're going to have it for 3 years. 90 days before the end of the 3 years, the parties will decide whether they're going to renew or let the contract expire.
Okay.
So those are the different ways.
Okay.
So the main focus of the labor law and the contracts, who are they benefiting? Like because honestly, I'll tell you a story. So when I moved to Kuwait, it was pretty kind of blurry how the labor laws worked in Kuwait, right? And it was just like, okay, we came in, we got our money. It went 1, 2, 3, so it wasn't a big problem. But we witnessed others experience other difficulties as well. But it didn't really too much have to do with us, so we kind of moved on to the UAE because we saw that the UAE actually had, at one point, I think I even got the labor law book. Okay, yeah. I was like, hey, yes. I was like, yes, we need to read about, our rights,
Absolutely.
and things like that. And so with that, but at the same time, sometimes you have this feeling that, does it really benefit me? Does it help me? And Thenji, you've been here for 13 years. Would you say that you've seen a progression, a growth in how the UAE treats their labor laws, how they treat the people here under the employment status? Or would you say it's just kind of been something that's just kind of been stagnant and just, this is what it is? Like you said, it's improved since last February, yes. But is it really helping those working here, would you say?
I mean, I think the laws are becoming more progressive anyway.
Okay, good.
Okay, so if you look at the visa changes, we're now getting the golden visa and the green visa.
Right.
Why do I like that? Because it's really separating your employment to your residency.
Good.
Right?
Okay. Yes, you're right. Yeah.
Yes.
You lose your job, you're on a golden visa.
And
you
just
stay.
and just for clarification, because I don't think we really explained the golden visa.
Okay.
So what is the golden visa?
Okay, so the golden visa is a form of self-sponsorship. You will sponsor yourself because of there's a criteria. So if you're earning maybe over, I think when I last checked, 35,000 and so forth. Sometimes it's taken if you own a property of a certain amount and so forth. You will now qualify for a golden visa, right?
Okay.
Which means you cancel your visa from your employer and now you sponsor yourself.
Yes. Okay.
You get 10 years sponsorship. And if you're to lose your job, your residency doesn't change.
You're secure here.
You're secure, and so are your children. They can continue to go to school. Some of the problems that we've had historically is that someone has been here for 10 years, or someone like me, they lose their job, and they've got 30 days in which to worrying about putting their kids out of school and so forth. So, are we moving in the right direction? Yes. Is it becoming more accessible to everyone? Yes. Okay, so we're moving that way. And then there's the green visa, which will be even a lower threshold.
Yeah.
So
5 years,
I think what we're seeing is now people are thinking, oh, actually, I've got a golden visa, so I can buy a house. I'm going to stay here. I'm going to
exactly
retire.
Growing the economics.
Whereas historically, it was just, I'm going to be in Dubai for 2 or 3 years and go back home.
Right.
So the whole mindset of the expat community is changing. The labor law is relaxing. Now they're recognizing part-time working. They're recognizing flexible working.
That's good.
When I came here, you spoke to women, maybe, parents who are like, I would like to work, but I don't want to work full-time.
Right.
I want to work 2 or 3 hours when my kids are at school.
Right.
Now the labor law is adapting so that it's becoming more favorable to more different types of working arrangements.
Okay.
Whereas before it was just full-time employment and the exposure was full-time as well.
I didn't even know part-time was an option here. You're absolutely right. I did not know that.
It's now an option.
Okay.
Whereas before the employer was like, why would I take her on? She's still going to be entitled to 30 day calendar days holiday.
Yeah. Right.
They're entitled to the gratuity, same like a full-timer.
Right.
But now you can prorate all the entitlements.
Oh, I see.
So now employers are thinking, okay, now I could actually do a job share. So I can get you and you to be the receptionist. You come in for 4 hours, you come in for 4 hours.
Yeah.
So that's what you tend to find in other countries around the world.
Oh,
so
yes,
do I think the employment laws are improving? Absolutely. If you look in the DIFC, when it comes to end of service gratuity, now they have dues, the DIFC Employee Workplace Savings Scheme, where end of service gratuity is now ring fenced and protected, and we anticipate that will go throughout the whole UAE. So
okay, excellent.
we're moving in the right direction. It might seem slow, but I think if you look at where we were 10 years ago, where we are now, and I think where we will be in 10 years' time, it'll be phenomenal.
I think just to note, like especially for any teachers that are on, teachers qualify for the green visa.
Yes, they do.
Right?
Yeah, they do.
And that's amazing, because it takes away the pressure of having to resign, look for a new job, all that stuff.
Right.
But I think the biggest thing that we never give the UAE credit for in terms of labor laws, having worked in other Middle East GCC countries, the UAE is very progressive. That's before they even started the labor changes, the labor law changes. So the new changes are totally way ahead, and they give a sense of security, because if someone is going to uproot their whole family to come to the UAE, and you put your kids into school, like you said, and you're working here, you don't want it to end overnight.
Right.
You need room to maneuver and do whatever you need to do. But Thenji mentioned gratuity, and I'm going to run and jump to gratuity. So what's the gratuity calculation like?
Okay, yeah. So end of service gratuity is a benefit that you get at the end of employment. It's calculated at 21 days of for every year of service. So 21 days of the basic salary for every year of service. After the 5th year, it's then calculated at 30 days for every year of service. Okay, so that's a benefit that you get at the end, and it shouldn't be paid out during employment. It should only be paid.
That's an
end.
interesting one.
Hold on. Thenji hit a sore spot for us, guys.
So
She's hit a sore spot.
Gratuity cannot be paid out whilst you're working.
What happens if it does?
What happens if it is paid out?
Employment is continuous, okay?
Yeah.
So employment is continuous. So even where you renew your limited contract, it's not the end of employment. It's just an administrative change, okay? The problem with paying out end of service gratuity in the middle of employment is technically the employee could be losing out, because if you have pay rises over the years,
Yes.
and you are paid out at this point, let's say after year 2, you're missing out from the uplift, right?
Yeah.
So if you started at 10,000 dirhams a month, and you finish at 15,000 dirhams a month, and that's your new basic, your end of service gratuity for the whole duration is calculated on the 15,000.
On the 15, right.
Okay, so if you're paid out at year 2, then there's going to be some sort of top up.
Okay. I have 2 questions rising from what you just said. It's really cool. The first one would be, is there any way you can refuse payment of gratuity in the middle of your contract?
Well, look, you need to sign off your gratuity. Your employer will want you to sign off your gratuity so that you're releasing liability, right?
Yes.
So I suppose, and obviously I'm not encouraging any war
with
employers.
We don't want to go to war with them.
but you know, there's an expectation for you to sign off, to say I've received all my dues. If I was representing, I mean, it's a big exposure for the employer, actually. You pay it out, and then the employee goes to court and says, I've been working for this employer for 10 years, right? I want my end of service gratuity for the full duration. They'll say, you paid me. I'll say it was a bonus. I mean, I would say I would say that is exposure, because it's end of service gratuity. It's
right.
Not,
it should not be paid at any time between your employment, like you said earlier.
Because it can't be properly calculated.
Exactly.
Right. However, if you look at the DIFC, so the DIFC scheme is different, and this is what's going to come eventually. What the DIFC scheme is doing is employers are paying into this third-party trust on a monthly basis.
Right.
And it's equivalent to 21 days for every year of service, or 30 days. So it's 5.83 of the basic salary is paid into dues on a monthly basis. But still, even in the DIFC, the employee cannot access that money until the end of employment. So it goes into a pot. Yeah. You can invest, you can play with it, but you can't take that money out until the employer tells the provider, who's Zurich, that this person has now finished employment or they're on their notice period. Then they can take it out of the pot. Right? So whichever scheme you look at, the benefit that you receive is at the end.
Okay, the second question I wanted to ask is, you spoke about if your salary increases, salary increments. What if you work for a job for 10 years and there's no salary increment? Is that standard? Is it mandatory for you to get a salary increment? Like, what's the law around salary increments?
And I want to just latch on to that. So we're looking at that from the government standpoint and the private standpoint. Yeah. So is there a difference between the two, or
not really? I mean, I haven't seen anything in law that says you must receive a pay rise. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
It's usually contractual. So most contracts will say something like, we will review salaries on an annual basis, but it will also say that we are not bound to
have the right. Yeah, that little fine print that happens.
If, however, you have a company that has a policy that on an annual basis we increase the salary by 2%, irrespective of the economy, company performance, or whatever, then potentially an employee could say, this is a contractual benefit to the pay rise. Okay. So we've had that before, but you would have to, as an employee, show a pattern. You'd have to also show that this pay rise is not a discretionary benefit, but a contractual benefit. Then perhaps. Okay. But if we talk about the general rule, no.
Okay. And I mean, that sounds about right, especially being in the UAE, depending on your grade level and stuff, especially being as a teacher. So that's how that goes there as well. And we keep on, I'm just going to throw this out, we keep on saying DIFC. I just want to make sure that our audience understands our acronyms and those things. So if you want to just share the DIFC.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. So the DIFC is a free zone. So the UAE is made up of a mainland and many, many free zones. Okay, so the DIFC is the Dubai International Finance Center, and they are a free zone. What's unique about the DIFC is it's a common law jurisdiction, which means it's got its own employment law and its own courts. So the bulk of what I've been talking about today doesn't impact the DIFC. They have their own rules.
Oh, wow.
So we spoke about sick leave. Their sick leave in the DIFC is 60 days. They have 10...
so basically you're saying I'm in the wrong profession right now. That's what it sounds like to me.
So it's completely different. They've got, the courts are in English and so forth. Right. So that's the DIFC. Okay. Then you've got the ADGM. So it's the Abu Dhabi Global Market. They're another jurisdiction in Abu Dhabi. Again, on common law, they have their own courts. They have their own employment law, completely different. Then you have all the other free zones. So, Jafsa.
Ajman free zone, Sharjah free, all
those are under the federal law. Those are under the UAE labor law, the same as mainland. So they're based on what we've been talking about today.
Okay.
All right. Since we've moved from gratuity and all these things, and then resignation, termination, and the big one that's currently on everyone's buzz is the unemployment insurance.
Right.
So the unemployment insurance is unique because I think one of the terms is you cannot have been terminated from your employment to receive it. And you can't have resigned from your current employment to receive it.
Yeah.
So the biggest question everybody asks is, when can you? Because there's been an emphasis on when you can't.
Yeah.
So when can you benefit?
So the it's really meant to be a form of social security. So you can claim it when you've been fired, when you've been terminated, when you've been made redundant, but not for misconduct.
Oh, okay. So that's a good clarification.
Not for misconduct. So because misconduct is because of you.
Yeah.
But if, for example, you've been made redundant, you've got hardships, so it's very important if there are HR managers listening to make sure that the termination letter clearly sets out the reason for termination. Because many times we see your employment's come to an end, but we don't actually know why.
Right. Okay.
And I'm just gonna we're wrapping up here, but I want to just ask some of that one question that I know our audience is probably wondering as well, is that when you have an issue, when you have a problem with your employer and things like that, because unfortunately these things happen. You come in and you're working hard, but unfortunately your relationship with your employer isn't all that it should be, or they're treating you unfairly.
Yeah.
Where do you report? Where do you go? How do you start this process without feeling like you're going to be attacked, like you're going to be shut down?
Okay, so I always recommend employees to look and see what their internal process is. Mm-hmm. So you'll have a staff handbook.
Right.
Read your own staff handbook. If you have a problem at work, who do you speak to? Do you speak to HR? Do you speak to your line manager?
Right.
See what that process is. Mm-hmm. I always recommend employees to try and exhaust the internal process before they go outside. Mm-hmm. If they can't reach a solution, then you can looking at the authorities. So you can approach the Ministry of Human Resources and Immunization. You can approach the Free Zone Authority if you have a dispute. Okay. You can also seek legal advice. Mm-hmm. So those of us that are lawyers, we do represent employees as well, not just employers.
Okay. So a big one. This is me. I have my issues at work. I come to you. First of all, okay, I'm breaking down the process. Do I need to hire a lawyer? Where do I find information about hiring a lawyer? How much do lawyers cost? Is it a good idea to do a court case? These are all the things that come to my mind when I think of whatever. So basically, okay, let's start from an easier one, right? People automatically assume hiring a lawyer means you're going to court. Is that the case?
No.
Okay.
No, not. In fact, very few of my cases go all the way to court. So I would say actually from the cases, maybe less than 10% actually litigate.
Oh wow!
Oh wow! That's good.
So, a lot of us in the legal profession, what we try and do is avoid disputes.
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So, we have people who've been maybe, let's say, for example, unfairly terminated, or they've got a grievance and so forth. Sometimes we approach the employer or the employer's appointed lawyers and we resolve it and we close it.
Okay.
So very few of the cases that you see us dealing with in court is the minority.
Okay.
A lot of employers are quite willing to wrap everything up so they can focus on business operations.
And then who pays for the lawyer? Is it me or my employer? Because imagine the case. Come on,
I have a feeling that it's you because you're purchasing the lawyer,
right? Right. Then they should pay for my lawyer, right?
That's a good question. Look, here, each party pays for their costs, but we have had situations where when we are agreeing a settlement, we can say for the employer to pay the costs, and some do, especially if it is to do with signing compromise agreements. In the DIFC, it's actually mandatory for an employee, before they sign a settlement agreement,
Right.
a compromise agreement, to have had the opportunity to seek legal advice. So a lot of companies will cover that. So it's not unusual for me to advise on it. And actually, the bill for that advice is covered by the employer. It doesn't always happen, but there are situations where they do.
Hey, wow. Well, Thenji, you have blown my mind, honestly. Okay, like
There's a
the
lot to
amount
do.
of information that you've just shared with
No
us has been
worries. It's been great.
just been so like just informative, just really understanding how it is to be an expat abroad in
Yes.
another country, and how the law is not against us but there to help us.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people, I think, feel that when they move to a new country outside of theirs, they might know their law in their country, but they may not 100% take the time to really know the law in this new country. So I want to say thank you so much for coming and
No
sharing
worries.
this
It was
advice, this
amazing.
legal advice, because wow. I learned so much. I'm not going to lie.
Great.
I thought I read my handbook, but I need to go back and check that out real quick. All right, because that's how that is. And yeah, wow.
Just for our listeners out there, Thenji and Sarah Malik have written a book about DIFC and UAE employment law, a comparative guide. So get your copies on that. It is so worth the read.
Yes.
Okay, and it gives you a head start. Everything is about information, guys. If you're going to be an expatriate, the first stop protocol is get to know where you're going,
Right.
what's legal, what's not legal, so that you know how to maneuver your way around being an expatriate in any country you're
Yeah, and that will help alleviate some of that fear you might have.
Yeah.
Moving abroad, bringing your family and stuff like that. Because believe it or not, these countries have these laws for a reason. They understand that expats are coming. They understand that they want to grow their country. And the UAE is a prime example of that. The growth is, as we said earlier, exponential, and definitely come here and just, understand that it's okay. You're not going to be, ostracized if you have an issue, a legal problem. It is okay to fight for your rights. So that's most important, because being an expat is awesome. I got to agree. It's
love it.
wonderful.
We love it.
And we want to say once again, thank you, Thenji, for
Thank you for having me.
Yes,
It's been
we are
so
so
much
excited to
fun.
have you.
This has been one of our longest episodes.
But it's very informative, so please listen and come back to our next episode. This is Expat Chronicles with Kim and Lizzie, and thank you for coming and listening.
All right.
Yes.